Thank you so, so much for joining me, Aurora, and agreeing to come on Pivots and Paydays and tell your story.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
When I was conceptualizing what this platform was going to be and the people who I wanted to speak to, you were pretty high on that list. So,
Oh, thank you.
I mean, it's one of those things. You meet people sometimes, and I think you have such a magnetic personality, just generally. So I knew that I wanted to do something with you. I didn't know at the time what it was going to be. So it's fun for me that it's kind of evolved into this. And yeah,
Oh,
absolutely good to have
thanks.
you.
I'm feeling a bit bashful, but thank you. I mean, it's really exciting to be part of this, and when I hear what you're up to, it's something that I would really love to be part of. So thank you for having me.
I'll kick us off then with the question that everybody kind of dreads, but we get it so often, and it might be a good way to introduce yourself to our audience, which is before you started your most recent pivot, and people would ask you, what do you do? How did you answer that question?
Oh
It's a
my
big
goodness.
question. It's a big question.
It is a big question. I mean, so I think my previous role was quite a big role, and so I was probably one of those professional women who define themselves by their role. So I
Yeah.
would have said, "Hello, Hava. I'm Aurora, and I'm the Director of Strategy and Growth for BT Security. I look after the commercial team who built and launched the managed security services portfolio for BT Security, mainly in the UK." So that would have been my professional introduction.
I mean, you didn't lie when you said it was a big role. That's
Big
like
role.
that's huge. What does that entail? Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and what your day to day looked like?
Yeah, I mean, so talking about a woman who's made a lot of pivots, I was definitely one of them. But in this role, it was a very wide-reaching role.
Yeah.
I looked after sort of the commercial sales operations, so setting the targets for sales of managed security services, the marketing story, propositions. I also had the transformation teams. So I often looked after the governance of major programs into BT security from a commercial side. So it was really quite wide stretching, really
Yeah.
great fun. I don't think I will ever have a role quite as big as that until I'm CEO of Uncharted Brands.
Oh, I love that. We know what your background is. We know a little bit about your background. What was the context for you that sparked the thought of a pivot? And then what was the catalyst that mobilized that thought into action?
Okay, yeah. So good question. I think for me, in terms of, are you talking about the most recent one or just generally?
I think the most recent one, just because of time, but if you find that the story takes you back to earlier pivots,
Yeah,
please don't stop a white account.
absolutely. Okay, so just to go back to your question then, I think this most recent pivot came at a time where I think in the news recently, BT has announced that they're looking to cut their workforce, that they're really trying to streamline and go lean on their
Mhm.
offerings. And as a result, they've had a number of redundancies. So this pivot in particular came when I learned that my role was being made redundant. And I was suddenly faced with a decision on what do I do next? I could, at the time, I could either maintain my current level as a director by taking a step sideways outside of cybersecurity,
Mhm.
in, for example, like a director of strategy role,
Yeah.
or I could take a step down to remain in cybersecurity, focusing on one very small bit of what my job was. And the answer actually became very clear to me very quickly. With the amount of redundancies happening across the organization, I knew it was time for me to move on. And that's where the soul searching started. I just decided to step out and see what the market had to offer.
What was the decision-making process to get you to that point where you ultimately decided to pursue something else and outside of what you'd been doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I probably want to caveat this with being made redundant is ultimately a very personal thing.
Yeah.
And although you shouldn't be seeing or reflecting it as a personal like implication towards you. So I think for those people who are listening who might be in a similar situation, take a step back and recognize that the redundancy is not personal. So I had to go through that motion because I'd never been made redundant before.
Yeah.
But once I actually reframed it for myself, it became quite positive. And I used it as a way to reach out to my network and actually just say, look, this is the situation I'm in and I'm ready to move on. Help me out here. Have you heard anything in the market? Is there anything that you know I might be suitable for?
Yeah.
And really used it as an opportunity not only to talk to my network, but also to to sound out what's happening out there in the environment. Now, this was last year, 2024. The market was quite challenging.
Yeah.
Roles that were advertised or recruited for could easily disappear overnight or go on hold. I feel like the market is coming back around on this, so the opportunities are coming up again. But for me, it was a very quiet time in the market, which was a benefit and a challenge because it was a benefit because I actually had to serve gardening leave, so I had to sit and that gave me time to reflect. But
Mm.
also, it was a challenge because I didn't feel like I was making the progress I should be making as somebody who's job hunting.
Yeah.
Um, with that said, though, I think I took a big step back and I looked at everything. So I was fortunate enough to have corporate coaching as I came out of BT, and I essentially left no stone unturned. I started out with the coaching to help me get my CV ready to do the mock interviews. I started networking.
Yes. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Thankfully, I'm very extroverted, so the networking comes naturally, and I do really love people. So it was quite easy for me. I recognize that might not be easy for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, but as I started preparing for what I thought would be the next, like, kind of return to a corporate setting,
Hmm.
I actually explored courses around fractional work, interim work. I started looking at non-executive directorship roles. I learned more about consulting, and interestingly enough, a lot of the opportunities for me came through consulting.
Yeah.
But then also, probably more interesting for our conversation, is that I explored how to become a business owner myself. Um, and I was there with what I thought was a very unique idea in these courses talking about new business creation. And quite a few people my age are looking to become coaches. So they were there looking at how they could start their coaching business. And I was there going, I want to be a cybersecurity marketer.
Yeah. 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 I
I
love
want to
that
use
though.
my
I love,
experience.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to use my experience as a commercial director to help startups and scale ups. And that was what I was focusing on. And it suddenly became really interesting and really compelling.
Yeah.
And I started finding myself in situations where actually it became tangible to have this type of business.
Yeah. There's a few things you've said there that I'm gonna just double click on. I mean, all of it, really. I wish we had all of the time. But the first thing that I want to just like loop back around on was what you said around that element of being made redundant, because that's the reality for a lot of people nowadays. And you're so right. One of the immediate things that you do when you're in that position is almost internalize it, and you start to measure that progress that you're making while in that pivot state. You use the same metrics that you've previously used in a job that you've done for years and years and years. And that's always going to feel like you're not doing enough, like you're not making enough progress. It's a story that I've heard so much from lots of people in this community, and lots of people who are going through that state of pivoting, or that stage of being made redundant.
Yeah, I mean, so my heart goes out to everyone who is going through any kind of redundancy scenario because,
Um,
there are some people who are very resilient. They see it as the next opportunity. But for me personally, I had to disconnect. And that was probably because a lot of my working profession was tied to my identity. And I was very much into socializing and doing work at that level. The first thing I did was step away and spend 2 weeks at the beach with my family in the middle of May,
Amazing.
randomly,
Yeah,
over half-term holiday, and just start to reconnect with those things that, I may not have been giving enough time to,
yeah,
and actually remember that, you're not defined by your role. You're there for a reason, and hopefully you're enjoying it.
yeah,
I personally take a lot of joy from the work that I do, and if I'm not, then I start to think about whether it's time to move on.
yeah.
Um, and actually taking the moment to reconnect to the things that really matter help build up that resilience again, right?
Yeah, exactly that. And after you mentioned also that after taking that time and taking a step back, then you started to go out to your community and your network, and there was a lot of networking and networking. Now,
Yes.
I've seen you in action. You own the room when when you're networking. It's so good, and you do it in such a human way. It doesn't feel transactional. And I think that's a real skill. What would you say to someone who doesn't have that innate skill? How can they get better at that?
Yeah, interesting enough, I had a really great conversation with somebody I deeply admire, Hazel McPherson, who's a CISO, and she is not naturally extroverted. So she finds
Uh,
networking to be kind of the opposite to me. Now,
yeah.
I have to say, I love networking because I'm very curious about people. I remember things and I'm interested in what people are up to.
Uh,
So for me, that lack of transaction is just really the human element. Funny enough, I've got to learn how to bridge that into sales now that I have my own business, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm probably not as good as that as some other people. But when you're finding it hard just to even open the door into conversations, I think
Mhm.
what I started with was I had been mentored anyway to say that, once you get to a certain level, generally the only way forward is through your network. So that helps me create those deep relationships. But I start out small. So I used to go to people I admired, or I'd go to somebody who had just spoken and I would, thank them for their speech and actually highlight out what I thought was interesting and give them ideas or start to share ideas. So I met them with a curiosity, I met them with interest.
Mhm.
Um, but you could go as small as just saying, I really love your shoes. You know,
Often it's
don't
not the big things, is it? It's really like how do you connect to someone on a human level? And we're all quite similar in that respect. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and don't let that hold you back. Like, I know you've got to figure out how the conversation should flow from that point, but
Yeah.
fundamentally, people admire you for coming up and speaking to them. And if you've got good ideas, even those people you're gathering ideas from really
Uh-huh.
value ideas back in return, and it becomes a really lovely conversation.
I think it's so true, particularly when you're new to something or you perceive yourself as the new kid on the block, or so to speak. It's often to kind of deselect yourself from that position of being expert, but actually just based on your lived experience alone, you will be able to add value in some way. You will be able to contribute ideas. So I think that's a really great point, about how to connect with people. Like
Yeah.
figure out how you can add value and what you can offer. No, no, don't worry. But figuring out how you can add value and what you can offer, I think can be a really good way to segue into a conversation that can end up being quite fruitful.
I agree. And apologies, I was just turning things off. But yes, I agree. And also, if you don't have that, I think um, you can also just say, I'm really interested in that. How can I learn more? Right.
Yes. Yeah,
And then hopefully the person you're speaking to will direct you either to someone else or offer up that help yourself, right? And I don't know how
absolutely.
many times you've been in a situation like that, particularly as you pivoted into cybersecurity. The idea of just asking questions and being curious.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's my life right now, actually. I get told that I'm quite good at networking, and
Really
I,
good.
I'm I don't think I am though. I come at it from a perspective of I'm just really curious about pretty much everything, and I want to know. So everything that you said in terms of
Yeah.
how to kind of start those conversations by leading with curiosity, I
It's
think
probably how we connected, right? We can
yeah, exactly. That's exactly how we met. That's exactly how we met. So yeah, it really works.
It does. It really does.
Yeah, brilliant. So once you're in the position where you know that you want to pivot, you know that you want to go down that business route and you want to see what can happen there. What's the first thing you do?
Yeah. I mean, so for me, I pivoted a number of times. I
Mhm.
pivoted with moves across the world. I pivoted into new industries, into new roles. I
Yeah,
probably have a larger risk appetite than most people in terms of trying something new.
yeah,
But the first thing that I always do is so for me, I come from like the string of continuity across my career has been transformation. So I like to plan. I plan, I review the plan, and then I take action. And I really get much satisfaction in ticking things off the list.
yes,
And so that keeps me motivated when other motivations aren't happening, right? Because there'll be good days and there'll be bad days, right?
yeah,
If you've got a plan and you can literally just take satisfaction in scratching something off the list or making connection with someone, it gives you that energy possibly to continue the momentum, right?
absolutely.
The first thing I do is sort of make my list. And then I also start to weigh up a few questions. And actually, I thought it'd be useful for your listeners, really, is I look at the decision and I reflect and analyze on a few things. The first one is, where am I in this moment in my life, right? This
Mhm.
decision has arrived to me. I have this phrase that I constantly use, which is, I am here in this moment for a reason, right? And it might be something you need to overcome for yourself. It might be an opportunity. It might be time to pivot. I look at where am I in this moment? How does this opportunity benefit me? And most importantly, how does it not benefit me? Right? Because
Right.
as an ambitious person, I think, where could this opportunity take me? And also, does it align with my non-negotiables for the phase of my life? So recently, I was given an opportunity to interview for a role in a corporate setting, but it
Mhm.
would result in moving my entire family to London, and that was not something that my family wanted to do.
Right.
And so, actually, I decided not to pursue that. Um, and then the other question was, will I find joy in this opportunity? Will I learn? Because that's very important to me. And will I be set up for success? Because you also have to look at how long is the horizon for this role and what could come next. Now,
Yeah.
everybody's horizon is really different, right? And if you're looking to make something for yourself, a business for yourself, you might need to look at that opportunity for, okay, well, will it get me to the next phase of my business or will it launch my business? If you're looking at a corporate setting and you're looking to pivot, or even in a medium enterprise business, will this allow me to take the next step?
Yeah.
And I would advise actually that you always look for the next step. Don't go too far out. I get scared when people ask me where I want to be in 10 years
And
because
yeah.
that's really scary. But when people ask me where I want to be in two, I should know. I should have some idea, even if it doesn't land that way, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. There's this quote, and I'm gonna completely butcher it, but there's this quote around even if things don't go to plan, the practice of planning is where the value is. And I think that's so powerful. I also love what you've said. I think those questions are vital ones because they seem to also incorporate the holistic you as opposed to just what do I want from my career? Because fundamentally, like your career has to fit you and all of you, and you have to learn, you have to find joy, you have to understand what the downfalls are going to be, and think all of that through and make sure it's an intentional decision that you're making. So thank you for giving us an actual checklist. This is
No
brilliant.
worries. No
Excellent.
worries. I mean, I think it applies in every scenario as well, right?
Yeah.
Because, for example, I wanted to work with startups when I stepped out. When I stepped out of the corporate environment, I wanted to work with startups. But actually it's high risk, right?
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
they're lacking in resources, particularly in marketing. It's seen as a luxury. And although I was able to advise them and sort of create what is a lovely pipeline of potential customers, they couldn't necessarily afford the work, or they couldn't afford to engage me at the time that they wanted.
Mhm.
Then I moved into scale ups, and I'm currently helping in a scale up environment on a contract to help them identify where they market and how they build up their kind of momentum even further than where they are.
Yeah.
And actually, they have money to spend, but not a lot, right? So you're taking on risk.
Mhm.
And sometimes you need to be able to move around and sort of test the boundaries of that, and possibly even um, be agile or nimble in approaching what will become kind of a paid gig.
Yeah. Absolutely. That is an excellent segue into the next few questions that I have,
Ah,
which
okay.
is which is the kind of practical elephant in the room, or so to speak, when you're pivoting, which is how do I keep the lights on, And that looks different for everyone, but I just wondered what was in your journey and in this most recent pivot, how did you approach that, and how did you do it fundamentally?
Yeah, so I think I had the luxury of time, and also I had a bit of money in terms of stepping away, and that gave me a little bit of time to breathe. In truth, that actually allowed me just to reflect and like reconnect with the world and like look up and see a whole new kind of environment in terms of what the opportunities were.
Uh-huh.
Um, I then just went to learning, 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 learning.
Yeah.
But I started by taking on small pieces of work, and earned a little bit of money doing that.
Yeah.
And then I took on a larger contract, and now I've got sort of a pipeline of work that's coming through, whether it goes through the people I partnered with in my contract or whether it comes through uncharted brands, is to be questioned. But actually, it allowed me a chance to um, kind of maintain a small amount of revenue while
Uh-huh.
I was looking to gear up, essentially. I know a lot of people try it as a side hustle, which I think is a really safe way to do it.
Yeah.
If you are able to take reduced hours in your job, or if you find yourself with time to spare or a deep interest in something, you can
Mhm.
start it out as a side hustle. I also think learning, there's an awful lot of opportunity for us to take on new courses, and study. And that doesn't necessarily mean like an advanced degree from a university, right?
Yeah.
Interesting enough, I just recently learned that Plexel's offering free courses on how AI can work in a creative industry, which is
Wow.
really relevant for me, right, as a marketer.
Yeah.
And also, DCIT are investing heavily in founders courses. So there's recently been advertised a course in my neck of the woods, Gloucestershire, where you go in a week long and you learn what it's like to do your own startup, and it's free. Right. So there are a lot of resources coming up that are encouraging people to try out their ideas, to be innovative, and to keep the UK kind of churning in terms of great ideas and innovations into the market.
That's so brilliant, and thank you for sharing those. It's amazing just how much is out there in terms of resources and in terms of kind of communities and people even giving their time to guide and shepherd other people who are seeking and looking to learn and grow. And that's that word, that learning element has featured quite a lot since the beginning of this conversation. I think
Yes.
that definitely comes across as something that you're quite passionate about, which is really important, particularly when, you know, as we know, things can change quite rapidly, and you can end up in a situation where you're having to learn new skills, and staying open to that learning, I think, is such a brilliant mindset.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And then, if you're talking about pivoting, you're going to have to learn something new anyway, right? Because you're
Whatever.
stepping into a new role. Every new role requires learning. If you're trying to take forward your own ideas, you're going to need to learn what it's like to be either self-employed or consulting, contracting. So everything takes a bit of learning.
Yeah.
Also, if you take a step back and you look at potential courses, that's a good way to create a network in the area that you want to be. Um,
Yeah.
and and that is priceless, right? Because people are going to help each other once they get to know you.
That community element, I definitely found that in my pivot. So when I was pivoting into cybersecurity, I knew absolutely nothing. So I went and I did a boot camp, and last week actually at Cyber UK, I actually ran into one of my mentors,
Amazing.
and we'd never met in person even, but I recognized her because I'd been staring at her in 2D for all those weeks. And it was really incredible, just to catch up and have that conversation.
Amazing.
Often, I think when people pour their time into helping other people with their aspirations, they do it without expecting to like ever see them again. So as the person that's taken that value, you don't always get to say thank you. So that was quite nice.
That's actually a really good point, though. Gratitude as well. Gratitude goes so far. I mean,
Yeah,
like honestly, it goes so far, and it's a really good way to connect you to people.
yeah,
Um, it's funny
definitely.
that you say that because I do a lot of public speaking. I speak, for women who are in business. I speak for skills and cybersecurity skills. I also have spoken at a number of events, just generally like conferences.
Yeah.
Um, and what I find really exciting as a speaker, if this doesn't help people who may not be extroverted, I don't know what does. But I often get people walking up to me at events saying, "You're Aurora," and I'm really pleased to see them again.
Yeah.
And they say, "I really loved your conversation," or "How are you doing? I haven't seen you since this speaking event." And it's just really wonderful. I mean, I think we benefit from being in a very friendly environment in terms of our industry, but I also find that this transcends, as a woman who is working in the digital market at the moment in terms of e-commerce. I find, people in e-commerce to be just as friendly. So, just another reason, why that exchange is so important. And you're right about community, and gratitude.
Absolutely. And also that doesn't surprise me at all, because you really are a wonderful person. So
Oh, thank you.
I've had the pleasure of, listening to you speak. I think it was maybe on the first time I met you, I got to listen to you speak the next day. And yeah, it really is powerful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I
So
do love speaking. I
yeah,
do. That
okay.
that means a lot to me. Thank you. Because sometimes when you go up on the stage, you worry that you may not message out something that's relevant to the people that are listening.
Yeah.
And so fundamentally in any environment that you're in, if you're speaking, it's really important to connect with people around what they need. Yeah.
So you've mentioned the finances and the community element. Was there any other resource apart from those two that were constraints for you as you were starting up that pivot and freshly stepping into it?
Oh, there's so many constraints. I mean, there's lots of loopholes and
Yeah.
lots of traps you fall into. I think the importance about those is being kind of nimble and forgiving, right?
Mhm.
That there's very few mistakes that you're going to make that'll be hugely problematic, right? And even then, you've got to get up, and dust yourself off.
Mm. Yeah.
But for me, I think I had been previously self-employed actually when I arrived to the UK. So I was actually trained as a teacher. I taught for 2 years in the
Oh,
schools. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it was really good fun. I have a master's degree in special education. I came over to the UK. What was meant to be 6 months ended up being here. I'm still here, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so when I learned that I had to go back and get credentials in the UK, I decided, well, I've already got a master's degree in education,
Mhm.
and there's this really amazing kind of career path over here in IT, I should do, which I can try out. So I went and became a project manager, took a couple courses, got my Prince 2 qualification, which was a big thing at the time, and then stepped into contracting as a project manager.
Mhm.
And I did that for 10 years. Now, at that time, there was a lot of work, right? So I managed to move sort of up the ranks
Yeah.
through contracting. I started out as a coordinator, administrator. I started looking after the PMO office. Then I moved into project management, senior project management, program management. I worked all the way up as a contractor.
Mhm.
And the difference was at that time that there were just a lot of roles and a lot of availability. There was an abundance of opportunity.
Yeah.
This time around, when I stepped out, it was in a really, I think, what was a very large dip in the economy. And it wasn't abundant, but also I had to sort of navigate what was a brand new way of going about getting roles.
Mm.
A lot had changed. I had been headhunted for most of my roles. So I switched from being contracted to permanent,
Yeah.
went through a number of headhunting kind of roles. And I stepped out. And now the environment's really different. It's very rapid. People are inundated with opportunities. If you're looking to become self-employed and you're reaching out to potential customers, they're getting inundated with other people doing the same thing.
Yeah.
If you're looking to go into another role where you need to be part of a reach out to a recruitment agent, they're getting inundated. Hundreds of people are applying for roles on LinkedIn. I feel like it's a bit of a minefield.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't expecting it to be that way. And I had to take a big step back and look at the entire ecosystem of what was going on.
Mhm.
I reconnected with recruitment agents that I knew, and although they may not have had roles for me, they helped introduce me to other people who did.
Yeah.
I started reaching out to hiring managers with variable success, and also started reaching out to potential clients. But what I found was actually it was only in those moments where we had face-to-face time that actually I got the responses that I needed. Everything else was very transactional.
Mhm.
And interesting enough, when I speak to startups, I say, okay, when you're marketing, you need to become less transactional. You need to become more relationship focused.
Yeah.
And in doing so, you're actually speaking to people who are key decision makers. You're meeting people who are influencers,
Yeah.
and you're gaining a bit of a reputation. So that bit was a surprise to me. I was able to, I think, I was able to kind of navigate that quickly, thankfully. But I was relying on being able to get up and running much more quickly than it actually turned out to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always the way, isn't it? It never goes at the speed and the velocity that you're expecting. And actually, when things take off, it can happen all at once, which not the most sustainable way to do it. So it's yeah, that
It's
sounds
true, actually, though. I had a lot of slow burns. And then I think last month, everything sort of landed at the same time. And yeah, so this is something you've got to get used to. It is a slow burn, and people aren't dedicated to it in the way that you are, right? Like you're 100% focused on what you want to do next.
yeah,
And you've got to wait for others to come around because everybody's busy, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Yeah, and so I think you need to, as you start to plan a pivot, if you have the luxury of planning and time, just make sure that you're aware of those things and that you've considered them.
So after you've, I'm going to take a few steps back. So after you've left big corporate and you've done one of the what most people would consider one of the riskiest things possible, which is to start a business. How has your idea of risk changed throughout this process of becoming a founder?
Yeah, so I think to answer that question, it's probably best for me to take you a little bit back into sort of my journey, right?
Mm.
So, I mean, I describe myself as a Hawaiian Californian Brit who arrived in 2005. I've
Excellent.
been here for pretty much my entire life, but I grew up in California. During Silicon Valley boom, everybody was trying things. It was a very safe place to try
Hmm.
and to innovate. So that was quite inspiring for me. And as a result, I think that I probably have a bigger risk appetite than most people. And then, I mean, I've alluded to it a few times, but actually, I had a number of pivots, right? So I started out in as a regional director of a very small boutique hotel chain, and that's how I worked my way through university. So I worked through university to
Excellent.
get my degree. And then at the end of that, I pivoted from away from hospitality into teaching. And I
Wow.
used that as a catalyst to pivot from California to the UK, right? So I've
Yeah.
done a lot of, I think, some people probably think high risk kind of decisions, right?
Yeah.
And then, as I mentioned before, I then went into contracting as project manager and went back to school and actually studied. I received my master's in science and major program management at Oxford. It's something that I was really focused on doing. I followed it for a number of years and then got the courage to apply. And I was quite convinced that I would make a career out of being a transformation director.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I did. I spent about 10 years in telco. I launched some really amazing programs. Like
Yes.
I helped launch the EE brand. I delivered the first 4G in the UK. And I also then moved to Vodafone and helped them launch a brand, Talk Mobile. So I was into really big programs and delivering things from scratch, which was, I think, also inspiring. So
Yeah.
it helped to build up that resilience around risk and to learn the ropes in terms of what you needed to deliver these types of programs and change.
Yeah.
Um, and then I pivoted again. I went into financial services
As you
and
do.
moved to
As
a
you do.
client-facing role. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really wanted to work with clients, so I helped them with their transformation. And I worked with Zurich and Nationwide, worked
Yeah.
with LV, British Gas, like you name it, like really big name brands to help them with their customer comms. Um, and that wasn't it. When my daughter arrived, I pivoted back to telco under the guise of cybersecurity, and I've never looked back. Right, so
Mm.
pivoting is something that I've always done. And I think sort of over the course of those years, not only have I gained resilience and understanding of all the things that could go wrong, but I've also helped to create a little bit of capital. And I've tried to run my own businesses in various guises before. So I'm not a first time founder, which I think helps me a lot in terms of taking that risk. So when the opportunity presented itself to step out of corporate,
Yeah.
although I was very successful in corporate, I never really felt like it was naturally me. I much prefer to get involved in a lot of things. I like to get my sleeves rolled up. Even as a senior leader,
Yeah.
I would often dive into things. Essentially,
Yes.
the team
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
groan because I
Yeah.
was very curious and I wanted to get involved. Uh, I wasn't a micromanager by any stretch, but I did like to get involved. I like to be down there and help create something amazing. So when this opportunity came, I thought, okay, well, the market's slow in the corporate environment. Maybe moving out of corporate is the right time. And let me see what I can do with uncharted brands and really focus in on that cybersecurity marketing expertise, which I think is growing in the industry, but is
Yeah.
still people still need those skills. And it felt like the right time to try it. Now, I've only 6 months in. So, there's still a lot of growing to do and opportunity that needs to be made for this to be sustainable, but it feels good. And I'm really pleased that I gave myself this opportunity because I don't think I would have otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds incredible. I wonder when you think about and talk about all of the things that you've done, what's how does that feel for you? Because some of the things that you've just mentioned, you kind of just said them as in it was just another thing on a Tuesday. But these things are huge, and a lot of the work that you've done underpins a lot of the infrastructure in the UK right now, and a lot of the things that we're using. How does it feel for you? Is it as awe-inspiring as when I hear it and when a
Well,
stranger
it's so
hears
funny that
it?
you say that because I actually believe the industry really values, at least in the UK, they really value that linear journey, right? So a
Yeah,
lot of times when I play back my experience, it looks a bit scattered. So fundamentally, I go back to saying it actually is a transformational journey. Like it is almost like either director of transformation or program management, where we start with the scope and we look to deliver it.
yeah,
But I've moved around and I've done that in various sectors and across various business sizes. Um, it's been fun. And I think, a lot of people you speak to, particularly when you're in an executive mentorship environment, they say, pick your goal, make sure you're the best at it, be a specialist, and that is one way to be really successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think coming from the Bay Area at a time where innovation was rife, even now it's such a hub of innovation, right?
Yeah.
I think perhaps people in the Bay can understand my journey a little bit better and kind of understand why I was motivated in the ways that I was motivated. I never had a clear path, Hawa. Never.
Yeah. Yeah. To be honest,
And I knew that I wanted to have fun and I wanted to deliver something meaningful.
yeah.
And I wanted to help people. And that's how I was compelled to sort of do what I wanted. Now, there was a point in my 30s where I really wanted to move up the ladder. I thought that that was the only way to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, when I stepped away from my job in corporate, I had to kind of come to terms with, okay, what is the meaning of success?
Yeah.
And if I step away from these big name brand corporates, the FTSE 100s, will I still feel the value in myself? And I think yes, because I hinge it on learning. And I hinge it on new experiences, right? So that's what I feel is successful, not a logo. Um, but I realize logos open doors, right? So there's a balance here to be struck. And when you're looking at it as a listener and you're trying to decide which route you want to take, this is where the planning becomes important, right? It's not just one plan, it's sort of multiple outlooks looking forward. And then you need to pick the one that really resonates with you.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely love that. I really, really do. It's part of the decision making that maybe isn't talked about as much, which is I think a lot of people still attach themselves to what is the logo or what is the job title or what is the company, and there's a lot that comes with that. But actually, once you do get through that door, and maybe you're 6 months in or a year in, how do you want to feel? How do you want to, that also has to factor into that decision making, and it goes so much deeper than just the logo on the side of the
Yeah,
building. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I really resonate with all of what you've said there. That's absolutely brilliant.
Well, I know you've had a squiggly career as well, right? Like, you've tried out things that are really interesting to you, and we're probably so similar in this way.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I'm not afraid to take a step down if it's something really interesting and will
yes,
allow me to step back up in the way that I want to later, or maybe not, just enjoy it while it lasts. So,
absolutely. And yes, I too have had a squiggly career. I love how you put that. But it's I think the red thread for me is again similar to you, going to the places that make me curious, and when I do decide to take on an opportunity, it isn't just about the title or the company. It's how am I going to feel? Who is managing me? What's the team dynamic? How, there's so many other questions um that I feel inform what the holistic feel of that experience and that opportunity will be like. And I think that's probably come with pivoting, and that's a learning that I've taken on because I haven't gone through a linear route. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, it's really interesting to me because I'm sort of in between those generations where like the generation before me would often keep roles forever, right? Like
yeah,
they would
yeah,
be
yeah,
in their role forever, go up the ladder. They might move aside to one thing or the other. And then I'm looking at sort of the generation below me where 2 years is good. They
yeah,
want that experience. They want to have the feathers in their cap to say that, they've had a well-rounded experience.
yeah,
And, neither of them are wrong, right? And I probably align more to the young side in terms of trying new things.
yeah.
But yes, it is really deeply personal, and I think that's why that reflection is super important. You need to be honest with yourself and put aside the views of your family or your peers, your colleagues, and sort of get ready to rediscover yourself, almost like a metamorphosis of your goals, really.
Yeah, that's an excellent soundbite. That's probably the one I'm going to use.
Yeah.
But talk to me more about Uncharted brands. Or what's the dream? What's the ideal? Obviously, you're 6 months in.
Yes.
What's the ideal if you had unlimited resources and you could click your fingers and it would become your dream situation? What would that look like?
Oh, so for me, I think, I would really love to have a thriving, marketing business where where I'm able to support people through their storytelling, their unique value proposition,
Mhm.
help them drive out their content and really resonate into the market that they're trying to achieve. From vendors to, managed security service providers, that deep cybersecurity marketing expertise. So I think the motivation really was, when I think about the things that bring me the most joy, it's that storytelling element. It's the ability to connect with people, right? That I think might be one of the areas that I want to develop as a superpower if we're allowed to have superpowers.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, after spending all that time delivering programs and getting my degree in major program management, the first thing I did was pivot to a propositional role, a marketing role, and I moved away from all that IT delivery. Although I know how to do that, right?
Mhm.
And I just fell in love with the idea of marketing and storytelling. So
Mhm.
now when people ask me what I do, I say I'm a chief storytelling officer for hire. And I really do focus in on cybersecurity expertise.
Yeah.
And I actually I'm hoping that this is an area in the market that people really need, because when I was leading cybersecurity, in my role at BT, every
Yeah.
marketing firm that we brought on board, I had to really educate and upskill on cybersecurity. And
Mhm.
even then, the best they would do is get to a first draft, and then I would have to lean in as the subject matter expert or rely on my teams to really make sure that those messages were shaped up the way they needed to be,
Yeah.
to enable our brand to thrive, right? So when I look at startups and scale ups, I just think, you probably do need a lot of support here, in terms of identifying who your market is and how they want to be spoken to,
Mhm.
as opposed to just that spray and pray LinkedIn messaging
Yeah.
sort of conversation about, why you are a better vendor than your competitor, right? There's
Yeah.
so much more to marketing now than just targeted marketing campaigns.
Storytelling is one of those things that deeply fascinate me. It's particularly when you're pivoting, right? Just to loop it back around. I think getting good at telling your story is one of the most transformative things you can do. And it's that space between you don't want to oversell yourself because maybe you're new to an industry or you're new to the thing that you're pivoting into, but you don't want to undersell yourself. So how do you it's finding that balance and understanding how to tell your story so that you're able to leverage the experience you have without talking yourself up as this expert in all things and then being given something that you just can't deliver on. So it's a middle ground. You've identified such an interesting gap in the cybersecurity market. Speaking as a newbie, there's still a bit of a disconnect, whether it's because of jargon, whether it's because of, not identifying kind of how to position that brand story and proposition so that the user understands the value that they're going to get from it, as opposed to just a checklist of the things that this tool does. So I think you've identified such a clever niche there, and everything that you've said is things that I've seen and come across in my in my very early few months in the industry.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed that the rest of the market feels the same
Yeah.
way. I mean, there are cybersecurity marketeers, right? And most often they're like wholly dedicated to a cybersecurity, like, vendor or something.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a growing number of us. But I think in an environment where people are relying on outsourcing to agencies,
Mhm.
it's such a pain to upskill them, and for them to really understand sort of where your product fits into the wider ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
Beyond just those sound bites. So I made a speech once to a team, to an entire population of startups, and it was called Cybersecurity Marketing Beyond the Sea of Blue Shields and Futuristic Robots, right? Because when you walk around an event for cybersecurity
That,
in particular, all
that's
you
what
see are
it is.
shields
Yeah.
and robots.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know how you felt like at
Accurate.
our last event. Like, we got to see cats and llamas. I was like, okay, people are getting this. People are getting
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. That's so accurate. I mean, I can see it like as you said that, I was like, yeah, no, you're right. That's exactly what it is.
It's so
Uh,
true. So true.
Brilliant.
But yeah, so
Uh,
that hopefully, in the future, just going back to your question, I would really love for Uncharted Brands to be a thriving marketing agency
Yeah.
specifically for cybersecurity, and the ability to serve the industry that I love in the way that I do best. Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about kind of the the things that have gone really well since your pivot. But obviously it's a challenging process. Um it's a process that has a lot of learning, as you kind of said, and within that learning there are things that you sometimes have to overcome. Can you think of a mistake that you made um during this pivot, and what was it? How did you recover? And what would you do differently next time?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I absolutely made mistakes. For me, I'm reflecting on this question. It was mostly around letting off the gas or easing up on the momentum of building a pipeline because I thought I had one work. And this happened to me sort of a number of times. So I do have a number of clients who do want to work with me, but are waiting for funding to be raised or their first round of VC funding to be released.
Yeah,
And I think that naive moment, I thought that, okay, they've told me they want to work with me. I've provided the RFP. I've given them a quote. I've talked them through my
yeah,
skill set and how I'm going to help them. We're ready to go. And actually, then we were waiting on funding. And so I didn't get the momentum as quickly as I could have done if I had just continued to look for pipeline and continued to pitch and go for RFPs and offer up my services. And that was a big lesson to me, particularly because I'm not so uh, sales is not my favorite thing.
yeah,
Learning about people and offering up solutions and getting in there is really what I love to do.
yeah,
And so the sales side is new for me. And, the way that I combated that really was got up, dusted myself off, recognized that there'd be delays, and started to seek advice and mentorship in sales. And I've learned quite a lot, actually. I've learned how to get comfortable with cold calls.
yeah,
I've learned how to suggest that my services might be helpful for them if they're talking through a problem that they have.
yeah,
Um, but I'm not a natural salesperson, so that was definitely something that I learned very early, thankfully. And I'm started to reach out to get the tools and resources I need to get better at that.
yeah. I think that's brilliant. And actually, like, a lot of people listening are going to be able to resonate with that. I think sales is difficult, particularly if you're someone that gets energy from just talking to people. It's then hard to transition the conversation to the sales part of it. So that's brilliant that you've managed to garner support in that element.
Well, it's quite funny actually. So some colleagues and friends in the industry were the ones who did it. So I've got a friend, Jill Broom, who works for Tech UK, and she works with small businesses, and she's just like, Aurora, you just have to take that last step and tell people that you're open to work, and if they know anyone who would
Yes.
like marketing skills, you're there, right? It's
Yeah.
not even asking them if they'll hire you, right? So, and so I've had a lot of advocates who, who are happy to just say, Aurora's your woman, right? Have a
Yes.
chat with
Yeah.
her. She's great. She runs Uncharted Brands. And actually, once I got to that point, it suddenly became less difficult, right? Because you're
Yeah.
not actually saying, well, you could say two things. One is, let me know how I can help because I'm available.
Mm,
Or if you know anybody who is looking for these services, keep me in mind, right?
yeah.
Those are really good ways to just keep finding prospects and learning more about people.
Yeah. And it is very much relationship based,
It
isn't
really
it?
is.
Like most things, I suppose. I notice it all the time. That element of everyone knows someone who's looking for something. It's then just like connecting those dots. And sometimes you're not going to be able to connect that dot because you don't know that person, but you might know someone who does know that person, and
Absolutely.
they're able to then connect the relevant dots where it's useful or where it's going to be productive for both parties.
Yeah. And that's where the magic happens. Like, honestly,
Absolutely.
suddenly you get known
Absolutely.
in the industry for the skills that you have and people want to use your services. But yeah. Fingers crossed, right?
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Thinking about kind of people that aided your pivot, people, communities, etc. Um, was there one person or community that made the biggest difference in that space, and what did they do to help you?
Yeah, so interesting enough, I've had quite a few wonderful surprises in my industry. I mean, cybersecurity, as you know, how is really open and welcoming in the UK,
Yes.
but also equally parts tricky because there's the appearance of needing a lot of resources, but actually there are a lot of people waiting in the sidelines trying to get into roles, and there's just this sort of disconnect in terms of
Yeah.
opportunities versus talent and how we get people aligned to roles.
Yeah.
Um, so. I was aware of this challenge kind of going in, but where I was pleasantly surprised is across a number of things. The Tech UK example that I gave you, I have done speaking events, nothing sales pitched at all, but actually the ability for me to keep my skin in the game and work with people I love across
Yeah.
small and medium enterprises. I continue to get opportunities to do that, which I'm really grateful for.
Hmm.
Um, I have another friend who, Rob Black, who works in the industry. He was actually voted as Cybersecurity Citizen of the Year, and I
Yes.
worked with
Oh,
him. And he has a charity, which is Cyber Leaders Challenge, as you know, because I think you were part of it this year.
yes. Yeah.
Um, and he opened some doors for me in terms of saying, Roy, don't worry, you're stepping out of your role, but that doesn't mean you're stepping out of the industry. So come along.
Yeah.
And that was just really good to keep my confidence and morale up, and also for me to continue to work across cyber. um, and then interestingly enough, recently I've just leaned in on anything that I feel like compelled to do. So I call it my passion projects. That's the one
Yeah.
thing that I'm able to do with volunteering and things like that. So I do volunteer with the UK Cybersecurity Council. They gave me the opportunity to host their event this
Amazing.
year. And also I applied to become a judge for the National Cyber Awards. Yay!
Yeah.
And was selected, and that was selected from an advisory group of my peers, and that was really wonderful because I had this vague notion that when I stepped out and I lost my logo, the opportunities wouldn't come, but
Mm.
actually the community is just really well tuned to support each other, and I've been just so fortunate to have the opportunities to do things that I thought may not ever happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're completely right. I think the community is such a phenomenal one, and it is so friendly, but also you're really good at what you do.
Oh,
As I
thank
said,
you.
when you were kind of, reflecting on the things that you've achieved, they might seem mundane to you now because, you've been there, you've done that. But actually, when someone hearing it for the first time, it's really incredible what you've done in this space, and actually you add a lot of value to the spaces and the events that you're going to or being a part of, and well, they're lucky to have you.
Oh, that means so much to me. Thank you. Yeah, that was, yeah, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Such a big part of this pivot journey, and even getting ready to like embark on it is the outlook and the mindset that comes with it. What has been the most surprising thing for you about the person you're becoming during this pivot journey?
I think I'm becoming more open-minded
Mhm.
to opportunities that didn't necessarily fit the path that I had expected, right?
Yeah.
So, and a lot of that I think comes with the time of my life, possibly about what I've already done.
Mm.
My children, generally, I have taken a big step back and looked at the entire ecosystem of my life and decided, made decisions that will really benefit me. And
Yeah.
that open-mindedness, I think, supports my resilience, but also it means that when I see an opportunity that I may not have normally gone for because it didn't fit in the path,
Yeah.
I'm more willing to try. So, for example, who knows? I find out later, but I did apply for a grant, and I'm about to apply for another one, which will allow me to contribute, innovation into cybersecurity beyond just marketing.
Mhm.
And I probably would have never done that, right? But the opportunity was presented. I was encouraged to go for it. I learned about it through a network who wants to help support me build my ideas.
Yeah.
And I collaborated with a number of people to get that grant to where it needed to be. So, kind of further strengthens that community feel that we talked about,
Absolutely.
but also that ability to take on new ideas that you may not have originally thought fit into that vision, but do somehow, right?
That's brilliant, by the way. That's like
Oh, thanks. Well,
incredible.
fingers
That's
crossed.
Yeah, I'll keep everything crossed for you. I'm if you get
Maybe
it.
I'll come back on and let you know what that one is
Yeah.
if I'm successful.
Do. Your invitation is an open invitation. Come at any time. So it wouldn't I mean, I can't speak to such a senior cybersecurity leader and not ask about the emerging trends and how you think about them, how you feel about them, what's exciting for you in the next few months and years.
So, I mean, I think actually, funny enough, I'm doing a speaking event next week on this topic around sort of emerging technology and
Mhm.
cybersecurity. And I can speak at length around how great AI is going to be in terms of engaging us on proactive and reactive sort of
Mhm.
forensic investigations, etc. I mean, there's a lot of really great things happening with vendors in Palo Alto, and even Google is doing some really amazing things there, um, and many more. By the way,
Yeah,
not to do everybody a disservice, that AI side is really interesting to me. I actively seek out knowledge and articles that contribute new findings around that.
yeah,
Um, I was recently able to go to the IBM quantum labs and see where we're headed on quantum, particularly around cryptography,
mhm.
and how we're getting ready and gearing up for that. And actually, a lot of really amazing work is already being done there that I find quite fascinating. But for me, I sort of look at this angle pretty much regularly in terms of preparing our population for what's coming, and
Yeah,
more importantly, around educating students and encouraging them into STEM topics and IT in particular.
yeah,
So for me, it's about making sure we've got digital citizenship, that our kids understand the risks that are emerging, and that they're able to defend themselves and their families, and everybody's able to stay safe in what has become quite a fluid environment around cybersecurity, fraud, things like that. Next week, I'm talking about AI and quantum specifically. I do love the idea of where we're headed with endpoints and IoT and autonomous vehicles, and how we go to securing robots and things like that as they come. So there's a lot of really interesting topics happening there, as well as cybersecurity in space. Um,
yes, yeah,
I think there's so many ways to go forward in terms of understanding, protecting technologies and innovations that include cybersecurity, and automation that we just haven't fathomed or dreamt about yet. So I geek out on that kind of stuff.
yeah.
I mean, what do you find really interesting at the moment? Same question to you.
Yeah, well, similar things to be honest. I think that the really obvious one is everything that we're going to be able to leverage with AI. I think that's probably what I've been looking into most over the last 2 or 3 weeks, just because I found myself down a bit of a rabbit hole, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I gosh, it's in equal parts exciting and a little bit frightening. So I'm trying to engage with it and really try and help people in my community, in my immediate family, kind of along that journey, and make sure, as you say, there is that element of digital citizenship and making sure that people are engaging and comfortable with the change to come. The other thing that's quite exciting for me, and I haven't gotten the chance to like play around with any quantum computing stuff yet, but I think that's a really exciting element, because as much as I think the initial thinking was that it was further away than it is, and things have been accelerated in a way where we're having to start doing a lot of that thinking, and I'm excited to see where we go with that. And I think there's going to be lots of creative solutions how we go about protecting things. It forces you to become more creative and more innovative, and
Absolutely.
it almost feels like a contest, like a competition, which was one of the themes of the conference we were at. But that competition and that competitiveness and innovation and creativity is really exciting for me.
Yeah. And yeah, equal parts exciting and sort of
Slightly
worrying, right?
terrifying, yeah.
That's why you've got to lean in now. I mean, and fundamentally, this is sort of where, my love for the cybersecurity industry comes together with the passion around supporting small businesses. Because beyond working in the cybersecurity environment as a marketeer, actually, you look at the small businesses that may not even have basic protection,
The
and
essentials,
you
yeah.
start to think, okay, well, how are we going to prepare them? Will it be the large vendors and their software that protects them, or is there a way for us to engage and upskill the entire nation and the entire, then you start thinking about the implications of global business, and it's just really, it's a fun and fascinating mind journey that you can go under when you start to think about these things, and consider all the possible outcomes, right?
Absolutely. Okay. Last but not least, I would like to leave our viewers with a few recommendations of things that they can engage with in terms of resources that, would be useful for them on their pivot journeys. Is there anything that you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love podcasts, and I tend to listen to them on my very long sort of commutes into London and back. I love The Diary of a CEO at the moment. That's one of my
Yes,
favorites.
yes.
There are a number of cybersecurity podcasts as well that I listen to, some that are just generally fascinating about people who were hackers and how they came full circle and from being like a hacker, kind of troubled teenagers into working for the government and helping lead the way in terms of protecting protecting like the US and the UK. I'm just looking at, there's one particular book that was highly recommended to me, that I found useful, and it is called Working Identity: Unconventional Strategies for Reinventing Your Career by Herminia Ibarra.
Amazing.
And it, you know, it actually goes through all the ways that we come to the point where we know we need to pivot,
Yeah,
all the ways that we can then test that pivot,
yeah,
and all the sort of transferable skills that we take from one of our, from our lifetime of experiences into our new role,
yeah.
as well as resources to help you kind of get started in that change. And she specializes in people moving entirely out of their, you know, career into something new. And there's a number of examples for both men and women
Yeah.
around how they pivoted. So I do recommend that book.
I'm gonna buy that book actually. The next time we meet, I'm sure I'll be talking to you about it. That's incredible. Thank you for that
Yeah, yeah,
recommendation.
absolutely. I mean, there's so many resources to hand, right? So, also, I just want to encourage the audience that if they liked what they heard and they'd like to talk about kind of what they're personally doing, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to chat. I do often mentor graduates who are looking to get into the industry, but as a woman who has pivoted a number of times, very happy to chat with anybody who's looking to try something new.
Amazing. Thank you so, so much for giving up your time and coming to talk to us as a community of people that are pivoting, or as I like to call us, the in-betweeners. Uh,
I love
it's
that.
just yeah, I think this community is going to grow and grow and grow because it feels like pivoting is one of those things that it's not just going to be a nice to have. There's a lot of things that are happening in the world right now that, are causing that thinking to happen for lots of people, whether that's redundancy or, just reaching burnout or just wanting to finally start listening to yourself and chasing the things that you have maybe buried, um, to follow a more conventional path. So I can't thank you enough for coming and adding value to that space.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, honestly, I feel really honored to be invited, and I really love what you're doing, Hawa. So keep it up. I mean, I think it's brilliant. And I look forward to hearing the rest of the series.